Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blerdcalibur Podcast. Oh boy, I know I've been gone for a week. Destiny 2 released the final shape, which was the culmination of a 10-year journey, and this for me was on par with Infinity War and Endgame. So just like I treated both of those events as these massive, just things that are happening in my life that I had to make sure that I was absolutely a part of. I made sure that for an entire week I was absolutely a part of the end of the Light and Darkness saga. If you're not a Destiny fan, you probably wouldn't understand, which is why I used the Marvel analogy. This was for a lot of people who started this journey with Bungie more than 10 years ago, the end of an era and the beginning of a new era that either is going to be super interesting or is going to end up with us being let down in some way, shape, or form. But I absolutely enjoyed it. I laughed, I cried, I felt like a badass, and we are back to our weekly scheduled program for the foreseeable future. Now, the very first story that I wanted to talk about was one that really caught me off guard when I initially saw the report, which I saw the report really late at night, which was the passing of Comicstorian. The family and the host of Comics Explained, Rob, had essentially said that, information will come out in the future, but for right now, the families want to grieve, and I 100% understood that. Today, the police essentially released the cause of death for Ben Potter. It was indeed an unfortunate accident. It was a car accident. He was driving his Toyota 4Runner on I-25 near Fort Collins at 9 in the morning on Saturday. He went off the right shoulder and veered into a service road, and the car rolled over multiple times. No other cars involved in the crash. He was the sole occupant of the vehicle, and the police have already ruled out any type of illegal substances or alcohol being at foul play. If you're somebody who follows me on Instagram, you'll know that a few weeks ago, my tire blew out on my car and almost sent me into oncoming traffic. So I completely understand just how random and fast a lot of these things involving vehicles can happen at any time of the day. Once again, I said it before in the video and I'll say it again, my thoughts go out to the family. He was an amazing person that opened up the world of comic books to a lot of people that were only ever surface level fans. His ability to tell stories and get people involved in the content that he was essentially creating was like no other. Comic Explained, I should say, he had a video where he was going through not only the first time he met Benny, but events that they've essentially had throughout their entire lives. And he mentioned that Benny was larger than life, and this is true because it translated well to his work, where he made not only obscure comics but super popular and well-known comics larger than life that pulled you into the story and made you want to go back for the part 2 and the part 3, and for his breakdown analysis if he chose to do one at the end of the entire series. I think the YouTube comic book space, I don't think will ever really fill that gap. I don't think we'll ever. I can't ever say never, because new generations will come on the internet all the time. Most of them are over on TikTok and they have their own big 3 in regards to comic books over there. But for YouTube, for comic book lovers in my generation, I don't believe that we will ever see anyone that is just as dynamic and a fantastic human being as he was. Sorry to say it again, but I'm going to keep on saying it. My thoughts will forever be with this family, because I don't even know how to comprehend what it feels like to lose someone like this so suddenly and so randomly. But moving on from Comicstorian, there isn't any major news in regards to DC or Marvel, at least nothing that I would say is major in any way, shape, or form. For the most part, in regards to Marvel, we are still basically waiting for Deadpool. I feel as though everything is building up to Deadpool being the jumping off pad for all of their future projects going forward. And then for DC, it's the exact same thing, but it's for Superman, where Superman and Creature Commandos may be like the two major things that they are essentially working towards, that they're going to basically use as springboards to take us into these different, disparate characters that are going to end up making both of these new universes. For Marvel, it's essentially a rebuild after the Jonathan Majors situation and dropping Kang the Conqueror. And then for DC, it's literally a rebuild in reintroducing the DC universe in general. Now, moving away from DC and Marvel, we've got The Boys, where it was announced, I think it was yesterday, or maybe the day before yesterday, that Season 4 is kicking off this week. I believe it is on Thursday, tomorrow. Can't wait to watch it and review it. But Season 5 will be the final season of The Boys. Now, it sounds as though it will be the final season of the main show, The Boys, and we're still going to be touching bases with a few spin-offs here and there. But for the most part, the journey that we started with Butcher versus Homelander in Season 1 ends with Season 5, and I'm happy for that. I'm one of those people that believe that drawing something out consistently after you've essentially run out of material, or attempting to stretch the material, is how you end up in a Game of Thrones Season 8 situation, where you start off with a lot of love and goodwill at the beginning of a series, and then end up with it being absolutely despised towards the end of the series. So Season 5 sounds like a really, really good time to essentially end it. Every single season of The Boys has been an absolute banger. I've enjoyed all of them. Season 4 looks as though it's going to be just as crazy as all the other seasons that they've put forward. So that's going to be one hell of a watch over the next coming weeks. Moving away from The Boys, we've got Game of Thrones news, which, yes, major news is because House of the Dragon is returning this weekend, giving me something to watch again on Sundays super late and talk about into the Monday. But it seems as though we have gotten a green light turned back on for one of the spin-off series for George R.R. Martin's work. Now, for those of you out of the know, after Season 8 of Game of Thrones, the series kind of got pushed into the Shadow Realm for an extended period of time. Then they started working on House of the Dragon, and while House of the Dragon was being worked on, they also began working on a bunch of other spin-offs. We had The Long Night, which took place 10,000 years before the main story. We had Nymeria and her 10,000 ships. I believe Nymeria should be the one who ends up founding Dorne, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've read her part of the lore. You had a Jon Snow series, and then there was the 1,000 Voyages that had to deal with House Valerian's journey from Valyria over to Westeros following the Doom, basically focusing on Corlys Velaryon, who we've met in House of the Dragon, and his journey around the world, basically gaining all of his riches. Out of all of these series, they were all canceled at one point in time for different reasons. If I remember correctly, the Jon Snow series was canceled because they just couldn't get it to work, as in they didn't exactly know what direction to take his story in, since it occurred after Season 8, and because of the fact that Season 8 was really, really poorly received, they simply just dropped that quietly. If I remember correctly, the House of Valerian story was dropped for almost the exact same reason, which is, why are we telling a story about House Valerian when people are basically only interested in House Stark, House Lannister, or House Targaryen? The Nymeria 1,000 ships one was the most interesting one, because it really told a story about a more fraught time in Westerosi history, with all of these Rhoynar arriving essentially on the main land of Westeros, and essentially not only going to war, but setting up their own kingdom of Dorne, which would remain unconquered for like another 1,000 years. And then, of course, you had the Long Night series, which actually made it to pilot, and it got praised for its pilot. People said that the pilot was really, really good. It dealt with the magic of the Children of the Forest, the magic of the First Men, the origins of House Stark, the building of the wall, the original war with the Night King during the Long Night. It dealt with all of those elements, and it had a more mystic and dark approach to the universe, and it ended up being essentially canceled, which both shocked the people that work on it because they said it was really good, but that also shocked a few of the executives working at HBO because they saw the pilot and they thought the pilot was good as well. It looks as though the 10,000 ships one is back on track. It's not the one I would have picked. I would have picked the Long Night, since I'm a fan of dragons, magics, and swords, whereas this one seems as though it's just going to be boats and swords, which can be interesting in its own right, but it might not end up being as interesting as seeing literal ice zombies riding giant blue corpse spiders fighting the original Starks who are warging into wolves 15 feet tall. That's just me. I'm just saying, if I had a choice between swords and boats, or I had a choice between a dead necromancer riding a giant spider versus a human running into battle who's at the same time simultaneously shape-shifting into a 15-foot tall wolf, I'd probably go with the ice zombie and the spider with the wolf. But according to George R. R. Martin, he was talking about the person who's supposedly writing the new pilot. He was giving her a lot of praise and pointing out the fact that she's going to be writing the new pilot for the new story, which is about the 10,000 ships. Hopefully they don't call it 10,000 ships. I feel as though you can just call it Nymeria, because, you know, the story is about her and her founding Dorne, but that's just me. If HBO decides this is the direction that they want to go in, who am I to stop them? Who am I to argue with you? I'm just a voice out there in the ether that is going to be looking at you with a little bit of bombastic side eye and disdain, like, could have named it a little bit better, but we'll see where this goes. HBO has a track record of essentially releasing things and then instantaneously fucking canceling them, or making them go all the way up the pilot, burning through $20 million, and then not releasing it to the public to see if the public's going to like or enjoy what exactly it is that they're essentially putting forth. Now, moving beyond our Marvel, DC, The Boys, Game of Thrones news, we're going to be talking about Starfield again. So for those of you who do not know, Starfield just recently released... What is the name of it? The Creations Club. Is it the Creations Club? Yes. They just released the Creations Club. Now, for those of you outside of the know, the Creations Club is basically a mod store inside the game where you can go on, see all of these mods that have been essentially curated for the game's experience, and you can purchase these mods for your game by using in-game currency. When I first heard this news, this was completely new to me, and somebody asked me, you know, well, where have you been for the last, I guess, 6 years? Because this was something that, or I shouldn't even say 6 years, probably the last 10 years, because this is something that's been in Bethesda games since Fallout 4. That's exactly where I've been. The last Bethesda game I played seriously was Fallout 4. I did not like the initial release of Fallout 4, so I did not touch that game for practically about a decade until they released the most recent update, which added the HD textures and made a bunch of changes to the core game to make it run a little bit better. That was when I got back into Fallout 4. I ran around for a little bit. I really didn't click on the store because in my mind, I thought the store was just selling like DLC cosmetic stuff. I didn't even, and for me, I've always used Nexus Mod Manager to download my mods. So going over to Nexus Mod Manager and downloading my mods there and installing them into the game was just something that I had always done. I never thought that inside of the mod store, inside of Fallout 4, you could go in there and you can actually purchase mods created by other individuals. But once I started delving into it, I had like a bunch of questions. You know, do the people who create these mods get a little cut of the fee, or should I say the cost that Bethesda is essentially tacking on to the mod? Because if they do, that's a really, really good way to essentially make money for these mod authors. A lot of the time, these mod authors create these mods for Nexus Mod Manager, and it requires a lot of dedicated, diehard fans to go to their donation page and donate money to them directly. if you were to just simply not upload it at Nexus and you put it on here, let's say you charge $10 for the mod, and the cut that Bethesda gives you is like 40% or something along those lines, so you get $4, or maybe you charge $20 for a mod because it's a comprehensive mod that adds new quests, enemy behavior such as, you know, bounty hunting missions, things along those lines. You maybe charge $20 and you still get a nice chunk of it. It's a good way to make a living just creating mods and creating content for a game that you enjoy, or just doing, if that's what you like doing, it's a great way to make money. But looking into it, it seems as though it's a combination of two things. It looks as though the mod creators don't really get a cut of that money. It seems as though they just get paid in general by Bethesda, and nobody's really been able to answer or give me a direct, a good answer, I should say, to how exactly these mod creators get paid. Because if you're creating something and then Bethesda Tax puts a $20 stamp on it, and they're saying, hey, you don't get money, but what I will give you is like a royalty tax, where you get however much money I make, I'll give you like 15%. That I kind of feel as though that's a little bit scummy, and at that point in time, I would rather just create the mod and put it on Nexus Mod Manager again than have Bethesda essentially do this that way. But until I see somebody who in general creates mods for these games, such as Fallout 4, Starfield, come out and basically explain how the system works for them on the inside, I've yet to see. If somebody has sourcing for that, a Reddit post or somebody talking about how Bethesda essentially monetizes the creation of, because an argument can be made that Bethesda is essentially creating the tools and you're just basically using the tools that they create to create content. But the problem is the content that you create requires your time. It requires you to sit down and put this together. It's your personal man hours against the man hours that Bethesda themselves were not interested in putting in. For people who go through the entire game and fix bugs, for people who go through the game and they create better mesh textures for clothing, who create better mesh textures for hair, who redesign the entire way a character's body moves and looks and breathes. That requires time. That requires skill. I would like those people to be paid for their skill, which is why for bigger mods, I typically donate. It's not like I donate like a bajillion dollars, but I'm like, yeah, I downloaded your mod. Your mod was, really dope. Here's a 20, here's a 30, here's a 40, depending on, how much I've used your mods recently. I feel as though that's pretty good. If everybody could chip in and do something like that, we can get these mod people paid. But I just want to make sure that, I just want to know that Bethesda isn't essentially using these people as cheap labor, which I've complained about before in regards to them relying on the community to go through their game and fix all of their bugs, and go through their game and add things like FOV sliders, or go through their game and add things like vehicles. I've complained about this on multiple occasions in regards to Bethesda games, just on Nexus Mod Managers. I just want to make sure that these individuals aren't being taken advantage of in any way, shape, or form. But it seems as though that a lot of the players are starting to get worried, because Bethesda has begun putting missions that are created by the mod community behind paywalls. So if you created a free mission that might have been a bounty hunting mission for, let's say, Starfield, they're putting them behind a $7 paywall or a $10 paywall, or shit, even a $30 to $5 paywall. And the community is starting to, you're starting to give this a little bit of side eye. Like, okay, if you're starting to do this for missions that are essentially created by the community, by mod authors, how long is it going to be before you start doing this not only as your base practice for everything, but also for single missions that you yourself create, where instead of you uploading or putting the mission in the game, you just hire a silent mod author somewhere on the side to create a mission for $10. And then you have them upload the mission onto the game as though it's a third-party individual uploading it onto the game. And you pocket the money, and then you pay that person like an employee. Where does the murky line begin, and where does the murky line end before you start seeing some scummy shit come out of Bethesda? Because like I said before, Bethesda is extremely well known for the last 20 years, I would say, ever since Skyrim's original release. They have been extremely well known for heavily relying on the community to not only make their game better, but also fix all of their game's problems. So we'll see how this goes going into the future. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this. I'll probably bring it up again in the near future because I was going to spin the block and start playing Starfield again. But we'll see whether or not my fears are essentially warranted as time progresses. Now, big story number one. Oh, Adobe. So recently, Adobe changed their terms of service. And what was the name of that company? They were the gaming engine company that they changed their terms of service to basically supercharge. And when I mean supercharge, they were charging people like an arm and a leg for using their gaming engine. Was it Unity? I think it was Unity. Essentially, Adobe is going down that exact same route in regards to how they are treating people or people who use their products' content. Because this is wild. Now, for those of you who do not know, I do not use Adobe. I had a bad experience with them a long time ago. And by a long time ago, I do mean like when I was in college. And after I had that bad experience with them, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna constantly look for alternatives that don't require me to use this shark of a fucking company. And when I do say shark of a fucking company, I do mean shark of a company. The way in which they were treating creatives at the time for using their gaming suites, such as for Acrobat and After Effects and Dreamweaver and just Photoshop and things along those lines. The way in which we were treating college students, just the arm and a leg approach. I was already paying an arm and a leg for books and just being in college in general. Having to turn around and pay an arm and a leg in order to basically use one thing that I'm not even really going to be seriously using. I just need it for this one class for a semester was just a bridge too far. And I was like, well, what are some good alternatives? I ran down the alternative rabbit hole. Recently, the change was clarified. We may access your content through both automated and manual methods, such as for content review. Now, what I'm talking about here is a change to their content policy. Your content. Content means any text, information, communication, or materials such as audio files, video files, electronic documents, or images that you upload, import into, embed for use, or create using the service and software. We reserve the right but do not have the obligation to remove content or restrict access to content, services, and software if any content is found to be in violation of the terms. We do not review all content uploaded to the services and software, but we may use available technologies, vendors, processes, including manual review to screen for certain types of illegal content, for example, child pornography, of course that 100% makes sense, or sexual abuse content, or other abusive content or behavior, for example, patterns of activity that include spam or phishing, keywords that indicate adult content has been posted outside of the adult wall. But it does not end there. You see, it actually goes into the access to your content. We may access, view, listen to your content defined in section 4.1. I'm not going all the way back down to section 4.1 through both automated and manual methods, but only in limited ways and only as permitted by law. For example, in order to provide services and software, we may need to access, view, and listen to your content to A, respond to feedback, or support requests, detect, prevent, otherwise address fraud, security, legal, technical issues. C, enforce the terms is further set forth in section 4.1.3. Automatic systems may analyze your content. Creative Cloud fonts defined in 3.10. Creative, it's a lot of legal jargon for this right here. But essentially, what Adobe is saying is that at any point in time, if we, Adobe, feel as though you've created something interesting using our content, using our platform, we can go in, take your image without your consent, and use it as splash art, as wallpaper, as a backdrop at any point in time, without asking you, without telling you, without notifying you. Because you're using our platform, we can also go into your content, review your work, either automatically using a AI system or manually have someone go into your work. Now, you have to understand the amount of people that use Adobe for content creation. There are people who do they're photographer for models, let's say. They use something like Photoshop to touch up those images. A lot of those times, the models that are in those images can be either clothed or they can be unclothed, because sometimes they use Photoshop or After Effects to essentially go in and add a certain type of, let's say, dress, make adjustments to the dress, remove certain aspects of it, maybe change the background, depending on if it's a PG or a rated R type of photo shoot. What Adobe is essentially saying that at any point in time, or maybe you're just somebody that you take your own photos in multiple different positions and then you touch those photos up for sale on, let's say you have an OnlyFans, or let's say you sell them to a well, there are still magazines out there that do picture spreads for female models, and you sell them to those type of magazines to have your, you know, your face and your body shown off in those magazines. Well, Adobe says at any point in time we can go in and, you know, we can just take a peek. That's the equivalent of renting an apartment, paying rent on time every single day, and having your landlord just randomly show up in your apartment to see what it is that you're doing. Like, there's a level of privacy here that is being violated, which is, if I don't want people to see something that I'm working on, you can't just pop in to see what's going on with me and then pop your head out. If I'm working on something that I don't want people to know of, like let's say I take a picture of myself just smiling, you can't go into my account, take that picture out, and post it on the main website like, you know, Photoshop making the world smile brighter, you know, something ignorant along those lines. There are a lot of privacy concerns, and there are a lot of legal scholars wondering whether or not this doesn't break the law, because they're basically, yes, the information is stored on their cloud. Yes, the information is stored on their servers. Yes, the thing that is being worked on your platform, on someone's computer. But you don't have the right to basically take that person's likeness or a drawing that they made or something that they painted or something that they've done for, let's say, another business. If I work for Comcast and I'm doing something for Comcast for some type of rollout that they're planning to do next year, and Adobe does a automatic or a manual review, and that someone looks into my account and they see these things that aren't supposed to be released until next year, or maybe not supposed to be released until the third quarter, or maybe not supposed to be released until the fourth quarter, and they go, oh wow, those would be really, really good for a collage we're doing for our website to sell our product, and they swipe those and they put them on their website, and then someone from Comcast just happens to be on Adobe's website and go, wow, that looks like the project that we're working on next year. Why is that there? And then you see like my name in the corner of it, because they tagged you to let you know that they took it from you, or maybe they don't even tag me at all, but Comcast has the original prints that I sent them for this project we're working on, I can get fired. Not only can I get fired, that opens up Adobe to lawsuits, because Comcast can go, hey, we purchased your product with the intention of creating this thing for our marketing campaign in 3 months. You don't have the right to essentially use what we've paid you to create. It's a jumbling mess, essentially. You don't, and which is why there are a lot of legal scholars looking into this. You don't have the right to take something that we created. Yes, we used your platform to create it, but you do not have the right to take our intellectual property and pass that intellectual property off for yourself. And Adobe's like, we don't care, we're changing it. If you don't like it, you can uninstall, which is legitimately something that one of the talking heads over at Adobe said when they were asked this question. They were like, hey, we're changing the policy. If you don't like the policy, you can just go somewhere else. But even a step further from that, it's the idea that if you choose not to accept this new terms of service, because it's a terms of service that I think just recently went out a few days ago. Hold on, I don't want to be a liar in regards to the terms of service. When did the terms of service come into effect? I think the terms of service, yes, the terms of service went into effect a few days ago. If you are somebody who says, no, I do not accept your terms of service, they lock you out. They just take away the key, and they tell you you don't have access to any of our current content until you accept our terms of service. So what people have been doing is they've been going back to older versions of the software, because a lot of the times what will happen is the older version of the software runs on a completely different suite. So you can reinstall it, and then you can go into your computer's program and processes and tell it not to connect to the internet so that it never updates, and you can just use it the way in which it is. So what they're doing is they're trying to do like this retroactive thing where they're trying to go back and make it so that all of these older apps essentially also abide by this new terms of service. So you have to accept it, and you have to be essentially online at all times so they can look in your folder and see if you got any nudes. This is a mess. It's one of the reasons why their stock is down by, I think, 30%. And there's been literally a movement online for people to essentially stop using Adobe and move over to a lot of the other alternatives that have been around for a really, really long time. It's the equivalent of the DJ Khaled suffering from success. When you've been the top dog for so long, and you've been making just decent money for so long, at some point in time, the top dog gets hungry, and it starts looking around for ways in which it can eat a little bit more. And it seems as though they've decided that the way in which they can eat is to essentially take this route in regards to people's content, and then using that content as a springboard in, I guess, some weird way of hoping to bring more people in. I don't know, it's fucking weird. Whoever decided to make this change over there at Adobe is you're an interesting individual. Like I said, it's the equivalent of the change that Unity essentially made a year, not even a few years ago, literally a year ago, where on the back end they started charging these exorbitant fees for people that were essentially running their software. And a lot of game creators were like, hey, if you make this change, I go broke. Not today, but the second you make the change and I start having to pay you on the back end this ridiculous amount of money, I'm going to go broke. I'm not going to make any money. And you saw the competitors of Unity basically come out and say, hey, we don't do that. We're pretty fair. Come over here. And they got these major boosts. It's the same thing that's going to happen to Adobe. I don't see this change in the way in which they're doing people's content, or at least the privacy of people's content. I don't see this change lasting more than like 2 weeks. I feel as though the backlash is going to be big enough. They're going to take big enough hit with their stocks and their shareholders that their shareholders are probably going to start making some noise. They're going to start complaining like, hey, you need to change this shit back because now we're losing money and I don't like losing money. And you're going to see this change reverted probably in like another week or two. But moving on to our final story, Ubisoft is in the news today for AI, which kind of falls into the same vein as, well, not really the same vein, but it's a parallel story in regards to like the way in which Adobe is essentially doing things. But this is one of the few times that I find myself, in all honesty, agreeing with Ubisoft, where essentially the CEO says that AI can make games feel more alive, despite, you know, the growing concerns from people in regards to using AI in gaming and in movies, and the fact that the reliance on AI could cost people jobs. Now, the way in which I think a lot of people walked into this is the usage of AI to basically fill out worlds, like telling an AI to create a plane of grass, or create a forest, or create a cave system, or something along those lines inside of your game, takes away from the need for a developer to sit down and basically craft and map that out. You give the AI the tools and you give it some parameters, you tell it exactly what to do. The AI is basically going to go off and is going to complete it in probably less than an hour, which means you don't have to hire somebody to sit down and do that for you. But the way in which the executive for, or should I say the CEO for Ubisoft, Youssef Guillemot, he's talking about AI in regards to not really the creation of the game, but I feel as though he's trying to sell it in like a really, really good way. But he's talking about it in regards to making the game feel more alive, having the characters inside of the game react and move in a more believable way, having AI basically fill in the rough spots that a game designer may overlook to make the game feel more, essentially more alive and more real than it would have if you had just simply relied on only human hands. We're moving towards that whether or not people like it. It doesn't really matter if you don't like it. It's more or less going to be have a major impact on gaming in the next, I would say, 10 years. We've already seen how much impact it's had in the last few years. I mean, it started off as something that was just innocuous and fun. Like, oh, hey, you know, you can take your head and you can put it on, or you could take your face and you put it on the body of like Rambo. Or you could take your face and you put it on like a cow. Or you could take a cow out of something and put it in something else. Or you could move that thing over here. And then it went from being something that was, for the most part, pretty innocuous and pretty stupid to something that was super sinister, which we saw recently in the last year with the idea behind like revenge porn and deepfakes, where you could basically take the face of anyone and put them in a compromising situation. Or even if you don't want to take the face of someone, just a few weeks ago, we had I think it was a coach at a high school take the AI voice print of the principal and have the principal saying the most dastardly and racist things imaginable, which after the police basically got a hold of the original audio, they discovered that the audio was basically fake and doctored and the guy never really said it. We've arrived at the point now where AI is basically used for nefarious things in people's day-to-day lives. Trust me when I say this. I agree with him on the opening premise, which is that AI can be used to make video games feel more alive. But after a while, and it's probably not even going to be within like 5 years, it's probably going to be within 6 months. Once you begin using AI for those touch-ups, you're going to have people who look at money, go, yeah, but why can't we just use AI to do this instead of hiring that person? And it's a slippery slope. It's going to start off decent. It's going to start off positive. It's going to start off good. But eventually, people start crunching the numbers, and a lot of the times, saving money is a lot more important to these people and a lot more important to these corporations than actually maintaining and helping human beings who have studied and honed their craft maintain some type of decent living lifestyle. Because corporations are not in the habit of caring about human beings. Corporations are in the habit of making money. But yep, we've reached the end of the episode this week. Let me know what you guys think about any of the things that we talked about today. How was your last week? Was everything good with you? With the news that we got in regards to Comicstorian and how accidental and tragic it was, I think this is always a time, especially in loss, it's always a time to essentially just take a step back and appreciate the people that we love, that are around us on a day-to-day basis, because you truly do not ever know when something just tragic and random will occur and take those people away from you. So, you know, look at those loved ones of yours today. Give them an extra hug, or give them an extra kiss on the cheek. Let them know that they're loved and that they're appreciated. You don't have to explain to them why. Just give them a little bit more affection than you typically would give them. And I'll catch you in the next episode next week. Peace.